Does Utah have an issue when it comes to developing quarterbacks, and could help be on the way to the Utah secondary via the transfer portal? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, and you can follow our show on social media at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Kevin Borba of FanNation All Utes. And Kevin, there's a lot of news going on when it comes to the portal and interested players for Utah. Well, we talked about the receivers on yesterday's show, but today's show, we'll talk about the DBs a little later. But I thought at first we could talk about the quarterback developmental issue, because I still think it's a very hot topic. People were not pleased with, obviously, how Bryson played, because he did not play well in the bowl game. Felt like Brandon Rhodes should have been in there. You have Nate Johnson, who came in, and now he's transferring, and that whole it just didn't have the greatest ending and greatest outcome this season in general. So I think there are questions about how Utah does developing QBs, and I think some of them are fair. But I think the reason I would still tend to say no is, for the most part, the past few years, their main option at QB, the guy that they go, oh, this is our QB1, he's going to come in and perform, has done very well. Tyler Huntley was really good in 2019 and other times for Utah as well. He played very well that year, had this team almost in the college football playoff, and didn't work out great against Oregon, but Tyler Huntley was sensational and now does his thing in the NFL level. Then after Tyler Huntley, you, of course, had the COVID season. That one had everything kind of going on, so I'm not going to hold Utah against that Jake Bentley didn't play great. And yes, they went with Charlie Brewer. They should have gone with Cam Rising, but you know what? Cam came in after basically 2.5 games anyways, looked really good, and then still got the team Pac-12 championship. Then came back, started again, got the team another Pac-12 championship. Then the team starting quarterback, Cam Rising for this year, gets taken out, and then you roll with Bryson. I just don't know many teams in college football in general that can lose their starting quarterback, and when they thought they'd have him back at some point, and still accomplish their goals. That's what makes these stories kind of crazy. Like, yes, I know Arizona, what they were able to do, but there's a lot of stories when the quarterback gets hurt. Most of the time in college, the team usually falls off a cliff, because that's a pretty important position. And the guy who's a backup, it usually isn't the starter's 1A and the backup's 1B. No, it's usually a pretty clear gap between 1 and 2. That's what it is at Utah. And I'd also think, for all this transfer portal stuff that everyone's talking about, in some ways, every school is dealing with this, because you have quarterbacks who want to start and play, and there's only one job at quarterback. So you have guys that are transferring and moving all over the place everywhere. So to me, Utah doesn't really have a QB developmental issue, because the guys that have been their plan to start, outside of, once again, when an injury really threw everything off this season, have gone in and performed at a high level, hence why Utah has continued to win.
Yeah, I think the developmental issue, I understand the frustrations, because it's like, why aren't these guys ready? Well, let's look at Bryson Barnes. He was a walk-on. We all know he's a pig farmer. We're all well aware of the farming of the pigs. It's a great story, but he was brought on to be a body in the quarterback room, and he turned into someone who led them to a near Rose Bowl victory after he stepped in. He was a serviceable starter. I would say he was probably around average. I think he's going to transfer to a group of 5 school, or maybe like a lower Power 5, and he's going to do well. Like, that's not, his game isn't going to be Tyler Huntley's, where he does everything with his arm. He could run. Bryson Barnes had cool moments. He had bright moments, and he was developed into a serviceable quarterback after being a walk-on. So that's already one quarterback that was developed. I think the Brandon Rhodes issue also, I think it's tough, because it's like he was sitting all year, so you'd like to see him not have issues with the system. But when you're not practicing, or you're not getting those game reps, it's hard to kind of be.
He was running scout team again, probably.
Yeah. And so it's hard to be that guy. It's hard to come in and be like, okay, even though like he's mentally probably like, I think I'm ready, but the coaches know who's ready and who's not. And so I think that was the tough part about the bowl game. And also, I'd like to add, Bryson Barnes is trying to figure out what his life plan is right now. Like, he's in the portal. It was cool of him to come back. It really was. Like, he didn't have to do that. but he's in the back of his head probably trying to figure out where he's going. Was he completely bought into practices? Maybe. Who knows? Like, was he really focused on Northwestern? I'm sure he mentally was like, I need to get this game. Like, I want to win this last game. This is my last game. But I also think part of him, and this is just me speculating, was maybe thinking elsewhere. Like, maybe, is this school the right place for me? Is this place, do they have the degree or whatever it may be? So I think that's kind of tough too. And then they developed Cam Rising. Cam Rising, yep. I covered Texas. He was a backup. He was probably the 4th string quarterback at Texas by the time he left, because they had Sam Ehlinger, they had Casey Thompson, they had Cam Rising, they had Jaquindon Jackson was in the mix the next year. So it was like he was so far down on the depth chart, where it was like they developed him into a starting caliber quarterback. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I just think that development is getting confused with results. And I don't think just because a quarterback doesn't put up gaudy numbers doesn't mean they're not developed. I think Bryson Barnes was better than what we expected. I think Nate Johnson could have been developed more, but I also think that they tried to be a little too gadget guy with him. And then when it was his turn to start, it was like, oh, well, we don't have a playbook for him outside of like the 7 plays where he comes in and runs. So it was like, I think it was just a mixture of like, I understand why people are frustrated, but these guys are all being developed into more than what we were expecting. Like every single one of them outside of Johnson, I would say, kind of exceeded expectations.
1,000%. I think it's a fantastic point you made on how Utah helped Bryson raise his level of play. And yes, it did not work out with Nate Johnson, as I thought you highlighted. But once again, Nate Johnson wasn't the plan. That's where like we said, I don't feel like Utah is a quarterback development issue, because the main move for Utah was Cam Rising is going to be our guy this year. They thought he was going to come back. And I still believe that Utah thought at some point he was going to play, because they would have added a transfer. They know what they were doing with Bryson when he came in against Washington State the year prior. They saw him play in the Rose Bowl. They weren't like, oh yeah, that's our starting quarterback. If there's a chance Cam misses the whole season, we'll be fine with Bryson. We can accomplish everything we want. No, the mindset was Bryson can help us win these first couple games. Exactly what Utah did, starting off the season extremely strong until they ran into Oregon State in that game, in their 5th game of the season. So yeah, like I said, I totally agree with you. What were you saying?
I think the problem isn't development. I think the problem is, like you talked about earlier, there's one quarterback on the field at all times, 99.9% of the time. Well, there's one quarterback on the field, and it's not a development issue. It's just sometimes it's not like your timing. Like, it's just not, you show up to Utah if you're Nate Johnson and you think Cam Rising is going to leave after this year. I think Bryson Barnes probably felt the same way, because I'm sure if Cam Rising played and went off to the NFL, I'm sure both of those guys would have stayed and tried to compete for the starting job.
Through spring, I agree.
Yeah, so I think it's just more so of a timing issue. Like, it happens all the time where Miller Moss at USC, he shows up, they bring in Jackson Dart in the same class as him. Then they change the coaches. Caleb Williams comes in, and they bring in 5-star Malachi Nelson. Not everybody wants to stick around and wait their turn for a chance to compete. And so it's just one of those things where I think it's a timing thing more so than a development thing. And I do think Nate Johnson was, I would say, misused, but he didn't, when he had the opportunities, he didn't always take advantage. So I think that also is a factor, but that doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback. I think it's just the offense wasn't tailored to his skill set. And so I think there's a lot more than development, because you don't win back-to-back Pac-12 titles and have a quarterback development issue. At least I don't think so.
I agree as well. And we knew what Bryson was. He was a backup. He helped this team win games. He was never the reason that Utah won games, versus Cam Rising versus USC 2 years ago. Him and Dalton Kincaid put the team on their back. They were the reason Utah won that game, pretty much. So totally agree. You mentioned USC and that 5-star Nelson. He's in the portal now too, right?
Yeah, and Boise State's the favorite right now. So
that is insane for the guy who was the number 1 overall quarterback, or maybe even player, was he? I mean,
there was Archibald Manning, but he's a top guy up there. They were like, he's better than Arch. And sometime for him, perfect example, shows up to USC. Caleb Williams is there. Caleb Williams obviously does his thing. And then Lincoln Riley has shown that he wants transfer quarterbacks. And obviously Nelson kind of fell down on the depth chart, and it just wasn't his time. It happens all the time. It happens every single program in the country probably has a backup quarterback right now that's really good, and we don't know it because he hasn't played yet.
Yeah, like you said, there's some variation that, and and also with the Nelson point. I mean, it is Boise State's the front runner, so he's not even staying in Power Four. So that's also where it becomes interesting. Like, is there something? Did he just not look good in practices? Why can he not find another Power Five spot? I mean, I saw Dante Moore not look good at all, and he's able to still land at Oregon, even though he's going to be a backup this coming season as well too. So interesting stuff for Utah quarterback, but we know they're fine this coming season because Cam Rising is back, and we can revisit this again when we see what Isaac Wilson is able to do at Utah as well, because he definitely seems like, I think he's a guy they'd love for him to be the starter in at least 1 to 2 years after we see Cam Rising depart. So something to keep an eye on for sure. And we're going to be talking about another area that Utah's keeping their eye on, the transfer portal as it relates to the secondary, as Utah has been heavily interested in garnering more defensive backs. We'll dive into that in one moment. But first, I want to talk to all of you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, in our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options and different opportunities for you to make money, just like same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can also make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find the popular parlays, and so much more. So you can visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Kevin, when talking about NFL bets this week, I really like the Bills to be able to get a win in Miami. That's one I'm keeping an eye on. I like the way Josh Allen's playing right now, and I know it's on the road still, but that's one that I potentially see. Is there an NFL game you have your eyes on?
Every game where go on Twitter right now, if you're a fan thinking about betting, if you're a gambling individual, go look at incentives because it's player incentive week. So
That's a good point.
Tyreek Hill needs however many yards to hit his the record. A lot of people need 1 touchdown catch to hit their incentives. So go peep some incentives because players are very prone to helping one another out, get their touchdowns or their catches or whatever it may be. So I don't have a certain one, but that's kind of like the direction I would look.
Make sure you check out all of those at FanDuel Sportsbook. Also want to talk to all of you about another sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at UCCU. Learn and Earn, the UCCU and Borba banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate. Parents don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift card stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There is age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning B-Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. Kevin, talking about this Utah's transfer portal tactics, the biggest need to me on this team by far is a #1 wide receiver. I think that's what they are currently hunting for. They have offered guys who have the potential to be exactly that. And as much as Utah's passing game does not pop off the screen, Devon Bailey is proof that there is still value to be had if you can be the receiver on this Utah team. Hence why I think Utah will find someone. And I think some receiver is going to find it valuable to be the #1 receiver on a Power 4 team that's also a really good Power 4 team capable of winning a conference championship and play with an experienced quarterback like Cam Rising. So I still think Utah's going to end up with a guy there. And what's nice for Utah defensive back-wise is in many ways the recruiting pitch is even easier because it's, hey, you want to come here and have a chance to play in the NFL? Jalen Johnson, Clark Phillips, Cole Bishop, and Sione Vaki after this year, just to name a few. Terrell Burgess, Julian Blackman, all of these guys coming through Utah off to the NFL. Utah's not DBU, but for recent, like the Pac-12 teams, I mean, it's them and Washington are the two that pop off of my mind too. And I know Oregon had Gonzalez in the first round last year too, so I'll give them some respect to that title too. But, this Utah team is going to be able to find DBs, and I think they've already found some interesting ones in terms of you got a guy you've offered in Cameron Calhoun. He's a former 4-star that went to Michigan. He's a guy who's really exciting. He's just removed 1 year from football. He's a 2023 player, so I think he just didn't see a path to play next year. Michigan is arguably one of the best defenses in college football. So in Utah, I felt like even this year, they were in that next tier of best defenses. So this could be a perfect kind of situation where he could come in, maybe start early, like the length and everything there. So once again, he's still the same player that was a 4-star pretty much to me, just wants to play. Understandable as most guys do. Just like a Miles Bowser is another guy too, coming off a good season at New Mexico State, had 70 total tackles, had forced a fumble to batted some passes down, picked off a pass. Like, this is another guy where I'm like, both these guys could come in, potentially compete and contribute to starting jobs. And I feel like Utah's got a real shot at both of them, Kevin.
Yeah, I think especially I know we're talking DBs, but one receiver, I want to throw one out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I like Dorian Singer at USC. So he entered the portal, leaves Arizona as like the guy. It was like he's leading the Pac-12 in receiving, goes to USC where it just didn't work out. I think he needs an opportunity to kind of emerge as the leader again. And I feel like Utah would be the perfect place to do so. And so, yeah, I just want to throw that out there. And
I like that one.
Talking about Calhoun and Rouser, though, I think Rouser is an interesting one because you look up his like 24/7 little profile and it's like, okay, it says he's 4-star as a recruit, but he started his career at Campbell, like for the Fighting Camels. And it's like, why? But he chose Campbell over a bunch of Power 5 programs. Arkansas was in the mix. He entered the portal last year, had interest from Colorado. He had interest from other major programs that ended up at New Mexico. And he's just someone who plays well when he gets the opportunity. I think there's always like, we talked about quarterback development at Utah, whether it's a problem or not, that's up to you guys. But what they don't have a problem developing is the secondary. So anyone that they can mold is a perfect fit. And I think Rouser could come in. He obviously has that Power 5 ability. For whatever reason, he's just kind of chosen to go other routes, and everybody has their own different paths. And I think he'd be kind of that perfect safety mix for Utah, excuse me. And I think they have an interesting safety situation coming up. I actually think it's the corners where I'm like, who's going to step up? Because the safeties, we talked about it the last time I was on. They have a couple guys who were returning from missions. They have a couple guys who are backups who got some playing time in the bowl game. They have Jelani Davis out of Modern Day coming in this class coming up. And so they have a lot of safeties. It's the corner spots that really are interesting to me. And then also they got Rabbit Evans, of course. We can't forget about our guy. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I think Rouser's a good fit. I think he could come and play right away. I think Calhoun's probably a project. There's nothing wrong with it, but when you go a whole year and he didn't play at all, I don't think. Maybe some special team stuff. It's just one of those things where like he needs a chance to develop and he needs a chance to work on his craft. And I think Utah's the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, I think it is as well. And thank you for correcting me on, I think I called him Bowser, so I'm glad you said Bowser there. I just know that once he gets here, he's going to be like a Bowser on the outside, not in terms of getting beat, but just looking intimidating, holding the presence in there like the classic one does in the video game. So I'm starting the campaign for the nickname. Wasn't a mistake when I said it, yes, but I'm going to claim it if that ends up becoming his nickname. But yeah, this Utah team, as we said with receiver, as we said with secondary, I know that everyone's kind of panicking about the portal because it's like, oh, we lost someone. We need to do something right now. Like, it's got to happen right now. This is a little bit like college. The transfer portal saga is a little bit like roster building in terms of, look, everyone goes after the quarterbacks first with the big money, and then you kind of see the rest of the guys. Like a lot of the best players in the portal, and yeah, I should say the creme de la creme, like obviously Ole Miss pulled in everyone, but then Ole Miss can't even keep their own top running back because Judkins just entered the portal from there. So that's the risk of anything you do in the transfer portal is that you can miss out on other guys too. But I feel like Utah's fine. There's a ton of other teams that still have needs to fill in college football. We're seeing a second wave of transfers in general. Alabama's center just entered the transfer portal. And I know people are making fun of him because he can't snap and everything like that, but that's a really good offensive lineman still that just entered the portal after the playoffs. So there's still a lot to happen in the portal. I think some people just get panicked and frantic because this whole portal thing is so new in general, but I feel like Utah's going to make it out fine in this, Kevin.
Yeah, I think that the hard part for Utah in the portal right now is obviously the biggest kind of mover in the portal is NIL. So players are looking for playing time and they're looking for money. Utah has the playing time aspect. The NIL aspect is, I won't say they don't have a good NIL, but they're giving out trucks. They're giving out Tahoes or whatever the other vehicle was, Explorers. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just if so-and-so could go to program A and get $500,000 and an apartment or whatever, and then program B is offering a truck and I don't know, like whatever else Utah is offering, sometimes you just kind of have to realize that you're not in the mix for everyone, but Utah will be in the mix for some good names.
Are you sure that Utah can't offer the Caleb Williams style luxury apartment that's been making the rounds, Kevin? I don't know. I think you got some scenic views in Salt Lake.
As a California native, I have been to downtown LA. I've driven through Salt Lake City. I don't remember seeing the same like downtown LA view, Maybe I just wasn't in the right spot.
Yeah, the mountains are tremendous in Utah, but as like at that level of a high-rise hotel that's insane price-wise, and that's just shows you the NIL. And I will say, Caleb is like, I think he was second only to Bronny James, which is insane because at the time that was released, Bronny hadn't even played a single game in college basketball yet. But that's the world we live in. It's called name, image, and likeness. The biggest name is that James last name, so that's where it's going to happen. And it's just going to be interesting to see how the NIL saga continues to evolve. And the transfer portal is a crazy saga as well. And I'm sure some of those of you who are watching on YouTube, I always tease the final segment. It says JT portal issue. That's a little bit of a vague title. I want to dive into what that actually means in our final segment with all of you in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes in our friends at Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have great last-minute deals, all-in price views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have last-minute tickets on zone and flash deals. It's just easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They even have views from your seat, which are really great because then you know what kind of a deal you're getting. They even have a low price guarantee, event cancellation, job loss protection, and that Gametime guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same row and section for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So make sure you head over, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, capital L and O, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Kevin, coming to this one to talk about the portal a little bit more. The JT does not reference my last name. It references JT Broughton, or that was his last name originally, because JT Broughton has changed his last name to it was JaTravis Broughton. We called him JT Broughton, but he changed it to McLeod. So now it's JaTravis McLeod. So in order to change his last name, he had to withdraw his name from the transfer portal, and then he was able to enter it again as JaTravis McLeod. And this is just the insane saga in the world of the transfer portal that we live in, that a guy has to do that in order to sort it all out correctly, because then you see things getting reported like, oh, JT's back at Utah. And that's not the case and was never the case, because this was just one of those weird technicalities. And to me, this just speaks to how messy the transfer portal is right now in general, and how there's so many things that hopefully can get regulated in the near future here.
Yeah, I think the portal has a lot of problems. I didn't know this was a problem, to be honest, because I didn't realize the name changing factor. And I don't know why he changed his name. That's his business, not mine, unless he's talked about it. But I thought it was interesting because I see the initial report and it's like JaTravis Broughton has taken his name out of the portal. And I was like, oh, that's great for Utah. He didn't have the best year, but he's a 4-year starter. We talk about how they need more experience in the secondary, someone to pair with Keenan Jackson, the Georgia Tech transfer at corner. And I was like, oh, cool. They'll have 2 starting caliber corners right there. And then I read more into it and I'm like, wait, no, that's not he did take his name out, but it's not his name anymore. So it's like a re-entry, if you will. It just kind of a technicality. I think the portal has a lot of issues. I think the days it's open is an issue. I think it kind of contributes to the game stuff. I think the manner in which people are contacted is an issue, because obviously there's always that pre-portal contact. And I think the overall just the portal process is confusing now with all the eligibility things. And so just add this to the list of portal things that need to be fixed, but probably won't.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see that, because we have things like Malik Murphy has to already leave and commit to Duke rather than have the chance, and obviously they lost anyways, but have a chance at a national championship. And if he had gotten hurt, he's obviously the best option still, despite how many media members want to gather around Manning's press conference. Malik Murphy was still going to be the backup in that. So that's where it is. Just, it's crazy that it has gotten to this point where you see guys having to leave school early, having to re-enter the other name they changed to. It's a wild saga. And I feel still feel like Utah's doing their best job navigating. They can. Transfers have played a role in each of Utah's past 2 Pac-12 championships too, which is something I think that is definitely important to mention, is how Utah has adapted and changed. And obviously Cam Rising, pretty huge transfer a couple years ago that came over, developed to tie this thing full circle, and that it ended up paying off for them. So it's going to be fascinating, though, to see how college football does continue to change over the next few years. But as it relates to Utah's news in the portal, Kevin, where should people head over to if they want to hear the latest?
Yeah, go check me out, All Utes. We're following everyone they offer. We're checking on everything. We're even following a little BYU just to make sure, just to see who they get. Like, they just got a new quarterback not too long ago. They got Gary Bohannon, the former Baylor, former USF guy. So yeah, we got you all covered. We got you all covered on everything Utah football, basketball too. So come check us out.
All available there. Kevin, appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll be back with you soon talking more things Utah football.